The player capsules continue. Kai Jones is up today. Nick Carboni of WCNC shares his thoughts on the second-year player and the season overall today on Locked On Hornets.
We're Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your pods, and that includes YouTube. Also, Nick Carboni joins us, making the weekly appearance, kind of, because he's a busy man. He's going to be out at the NFL Draft in Kansas City next week, which is going to be awesome. Number 1 overall pick, Carolina Panthers. Nick going to be covering that. You can follow him on Twitter at Nick Carboni, WCNC. Are you excited about the KC trip?
I am. I mean, I love Kansas City. First of all, I think it's an underrated town in the Midwest. I used to live out there in Missouri, and I'm excited at the position the Panthers have put themselves in, and I'm excited to do the exact same thing for the Hornets later this summer. Let's have that number 1 pick.
Yeah, well, are we going to get a live shot from Nick for this show,
not
just for WCNC?
100%. 100%.
Sweet.
Yeah, I like Doug's immediately thinking, yes, not, I hope we get it. I hope we get the live
safe
shot.
Trip, hope you have a good time, all that good stuff. But what are you going to do for us?
Everything's on the table if the Hornets get the number 1 pick.
There you go. That is the voice of Doug Branson as well. You can catch his Substack, Every Hornets Boxscore, on everyhornetsboxscore.com. I'm Walker Mail. Catch me on WFNZ from 12 to 3 every weekday. I believe also we have not introduced everyone. Ollie is in the room today because you have some things going on where he needs to be in the room with you. So Ollie, yes, he is a part of the drops that we have or the transitions, and so now he is here, finally a part of the show, ready to give off some steaming hot Kai Jones takes. Kai Jones, somebody that was drafted in the first round, somebody that the Hornets thought so highly of that they traded up in the first round to go get after they drafted James Bouknight 11. And I mean, if Bouknight wasn't available, I wonder if they would have drafted Kai Jones 11, right? Like there had been a whole lot of steam with him. A couple workouts. There was 2, I believe, workouts with Kai and Charlotte, and everybody knows that he was going to be this raw prospect. It's not a crazy timeline that he's on right now, but still, I think fans maybe not as patient as originally they would have thought with Kai Jones being drafted, right? Like I always thought that it might take 3 years before you saw him even begin or enter the first stages of improving in the league. Nick, just overall, what were your thoughts on Kai Jones this year and that growth or lack of growth that you saw?
I think there's growth. I just don't think it's, an explosive jump like we've seen other players for the Hornets make recently from year 1 to year 2. Sometimes it is year 2 to year 3. So we'll see what's in store for Kai Jones next year. I think, he had to adjust to obviously a new coach in Steve Clifford, a much different coach who demands much different things than James Borrego did. And I think that was a struggle for Kai Jones and a lot of the young players, especially a lot of the young players that play the position that he plays or adjacent to it. I think that was an adjustment. He more than doubled his games played. First of all, he quadrupled his minutes played per game. So I think we've seen some growth. I thought obviously you have the flashes, you have the fun plays, you have the dynamic athleticism that makes him an intriguing player. I think he's getting better. My only question is, can he continue to get better at the position he plays, center, on a roster that has Nick Richards extended and Mark Williams looking like the future, barring a number one pick in the lottery?
Yeah, I mean, right, if you get Victor Wembanyama, I know he's not your traditional center, but that's a lot. It's all dudes on the roster, right? You have Mark Williams, Kai Jones, Nick Richards. Steve Clifford said that we're going to have to find out in the offseason if all those 3 players can exist on the roster at the same time. You add Wemby into the mix, then who knows what happens. Yeah. Doug, Kai Jones basically logged 2 stretches of real rotation time. There was the time that started in November and then the rotation time that came at the end of the season. Not great shooting in the first run, better shooting in that last run that he had. Overall, what would you say that you saw in the real rotation time and beyond that you saw from Kai?
Oh, I saw a lot of potential, but there are also a lot of areas of his game where you go, okay, he's either trying to do a little too much. He might not ever be able to do some of these things that he's trying to do ball handling wise. And then some things where you go, well, he actually really needs to improve upon that if the Hornets are going to depend on him, because it's easy to kind of forget that next season, if they don't add another center, that he's one injury away from getting major rotation minutes. Mm-hmm. So they really need him to improve his game. If Nick Richards gets hurt for any period of time, or Mark Williams, then they're going to need Kai Jones to contribute, and they're going to need him to make less of the kinds of mistakes that we saw in terms of bad screens, in terms of turning the basketball over, trying to do too much with the basketball, that kind of thing. Because look, the energy is there, the intensity is there. Obviously, the shooting is not there. He started his year in Summer League going 0 for 10 from 3. He ended the year by missing, I believe, most, if not all, of his threes that he attempted in that little stretch.
He made one of, in this stretch, he made one of the 7 that he took, I believe. Yeah. So
yeah.
He took 5 in the last 2 games.
And here's the thing. If Richards and Mark Williams stay healthy, then your question is like, where does Kai Jones fit within the rotation? And the answer would be, if he could shoot threes consistently and prove that to the coaching staff before he ever steps on the floor next year, then there is a place for him, because it allows you, he could be a piece that you go to in particular matchups where you want to go 5 out. But without that ability, it's hard to imagine him getting a ton of run with a healthy center rotation next season.
Well, and I mentioned it, right, with the 2 stretches that he had. He played 19 games really at the beginning of March, a couple games at the end of February. That's when he was a real part of the rotation, and he shot close to 60%, right, because he wasn't shooting from the outside all that much. And that's up from 43 the first time he was playing at the middle portion right at the beginning of the season in that middle area. And so I think what you saw was you did see more minutes at the center position, right? Where at the beginning you saw a lot of power forward, and I think the game was starting to be a little more simplified for Kai, and that helped him. But clearly there are still a lot of areas for him to improve. But I also think even defensively, you saw Kai Jones. We talked about the activity from him. Clearly the effort is 100% there. But there was the one game, God, was it against Chicago later on? I forget which one it was, but he was blocking shots left and right. That was a lot of fun. I'm trying to look at the amount of blocks he had. No, he had 3 against Houston, and then he had 3 against Toronto, the first of that back-to-back. And so there was a few 3-block games he had. He also had one against Utah. So I wonder if, there's so much sophistication and nuance that has to come with the rover type role, but the body is there for the defensive rover, which would be awesome, right? But there's so much sophistication and nuance that's a long way away before you could even dream of that particular scenario.
Well, yeah, and you only have to look, if you look beyond the blocks and look at the personal fouls, you start to understand where he fails in the nuance. He fouls because he's out of position. He fouls
because
5
and 13 minutes against Orlando.
Yeah, and so that tells you, like, yes, the block shot opportunities are there because he can jump out of the gym and he has this incredible length and wingspan and all of that. But does he understand legitimately how to stay on the floor and stay with guys defensively? I think that's still a big question. The game that illuminated this for me was against Toronto late in the season, and he went up against Chris Boucher. And Kai Jones, like, Chris Boucher is everything you want Kai Jones to be, but Kai Jones is nowhere near that. And the problem is he's on this team that's not winning, and they're going to continue to draft guys. And so the clock's going to run out a little quicker on him than if he were playing for, the Celtics, who could stash him away for 4, 5, 6 years and then finally bring him up after they've washed through a few other guys. The Hornets have 5 draft picks. Now, I know they're probably not going to use them all, but at some point you have to go, okay, we got to invest in these other guys. I mean, here's my question to Nick. Like, if the Hornets were offered, I don't know, a lottery-protected first-round pick, not in this upcoming draft, but the next draft, if they were offered that for Kai Jones, do you think they should turn that down?
No, absolutely not. Any sort of first round pick, even with protections, no, I would not turn that down because of the redundancy you already have. I think we've all kind of said the same thing where we like Kai Jones. He's intriguing. He flashes some nice things, but his development might not happen in Charlotte because of all of the reasons that you just said. When I think of Kai Jones making that jump, I kind of think of it happening somewhere else because of what's kind of solidifying in front of him on the Hornets roster. I know
this is going to be a bowl situation. This is totally going to be a bowl situation where, Denver fans are watching him blossom in Orlando, and it's so painful. But I think it is the reality of the situation where you have a few years to make an evaluation, and then you got to make a choice.
And last thing on Kai, the dude is an awesome guy to talk to. I mean, the energy and the personality is fantastic. And I remember Chad Ford talking about draft prospects. What do you wish you knew back then when you were evaluating prospects when you first started? And he said he wanted to put more stock into work ethic and then what he heard from guys that knew about the player. And everybody discusses how hard Kai Jones works. If it's going to work, right, then it will take the kind of attitude and the type of work ethic that Kai Jones already possesses. It doesn't mean that it's a foregone conclusion that it will work out here in Charlotte, but it would take that kind of attitude and energy. And so hopefully, it doesn't mean that there's zero hope. He's got to quit the fouls. I mentioned he had 5 and 13 against Orlando. I mean, he had 6. He fouled out in a game against Cleveland in 12:40, and he also posted another 5-foul game in 16 minutes against Indiana. So he's hacking. But if he can figure out a way, Jaren Jackson, right? Then he has the foul problems. But there was a conscious effort in this Lakers series where he only had 1 foul late in the game last night where they were able to stave that away. They were able to kick that to the curb. Kai Jones, not Jaren Jackson, Defensive Player of the Year. Hopefully there is some kind of principle that you can bring some watered down version and apply that to Kai. That would be fantastic. Doug is laughing. Are you laughing that he's not Jaren Jackson? We always have to
just
check in
a
on what you're
really
laughing
bold
about.
take that you've come to expect from this show. Kai Jones, not Jaren Jackson Jr.
Yeah, no, and I stand firmly in that, by the way. I believe it. I said it.
The aggregators are going to have a field day with that.
Field day.
Yeah. Tell your Tegna people, Nick. WCNC. Walker does not
we'll
think
put a
Kai
salacious headline on that one.
Is Jaren Jackson. I stand by it, too. All right, let's move on to some other things here. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
We'll get Nick's thoughts on the season overall, just figure out whether he thought the end of the season was something enough to salvage overall and just what he can expect going into next year. We'll talk about that as well. This episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage. There's a tab. Again, not My Garage because I don't have one, but the tab in eBay Motors, your profile, My Garage, and look for the green check to know the part will fit, or you get your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. More Locked On Hornets coming up next.
This is Locked On Hornets.
Assets, and you have to wonder, is there a time for them to do that now? No, is he mad at
the center position?
I mean, yes. Yeah, God, Mitch, make a trade.
That's just good. That's just good sports talk right there.
It's time for more of the Locked On Hornets podcast.
All right, we're going to get to the season overall in just a moment, but Doug, you have something else on Kai that you wanted to say before we move on?
Well, yeah, just something that really stuck with me the most. And it's not some of the high-flying dunks, the strong dunks that he would, the chin-ups that he would put up, the block shots, nothing like that. It was him rapping Llama Llama Red Pajama as one of these sort of in-stadium cuts that I saw because I have the League Pass Premium, so they play those during the breaks. And as obviously I have a baby, new father, that stuck with me because anytime now that I sit down to read Llama Llama Red Pajama, I kind of do a little Kai Jones impression.
Oh, is that baby Branson's favorite player because of that, or is it still LaMelo?
Llama Red Pajama. It was so funny. It was so good. I love it.
And I don't want to see that go.
The best part about those in stadium things, and you guys should look next time when you're at the game. The guys are supposed to be in like the huddle, listening to the coach and all that stuff. They're all watching each other be goofballs on the. Maybe that's part of the problem. I don't know. I think it's funny. I love it.
It's the Spectrum Center's fault. The athletic player poll, they thought that as well, that it was the Spectrum Center's thought.
Oh, that's right.
100%. All right, let's look at the season overall here. Nick, I know we already did kind of our main takeaways. We got your opinions on that. I think it was really right before the end of the season, the last 2 games that were played. But just taking some time to think maybe how you want to apply that to what the Hornets need to address this offseason going into next year. What's something that comes to mind? Okay, that was a real problem outside of health, because clearly that's not really all that controllable. What's something else you would like to see the Hornets address because of what you saw this past season?
Yeah, I mean, putting talent around LaMelo obviously is an overarching theme, but, you know, guys who are consistent shooters outside LaMelo Ball. You know, I think there were some good things we saw at the end of the season, but in pro sports, I'm just not sure how much of the momentum, quote unquote, you can take into the next season. But I think individually there's some players that you hope take a lot from the last couple of weeks. James Bouknight, obviously being one of them. You know, Mark Williams from his back half of the season, really, you know, since he became a starter, you know, you hope that those guys carry some of the things that they were able to improve on at the end of this season into next season, because internal development is going to be a big part of this. So, you know, listen, there's a lot of holes. There's, you know, players they're going to want to go try to acquire, and there's players that they're not going to be able to, you know, get out of for next year. So it'll be interesting, but, you know, just continuing to add talent around LaMelo Ball is just so important right now. And, you know, especially coming off a season and an off season where things just kind of stayed stagnant, if not kind of took a step back.
Yeah, 100%. I will say, I remember going into last season or last off season, the off season before that, we can go back 5 years if we want to, we can go back further. The glaring need was always center. And that's not as glaring anymore. You can still want to add depth, sure, right? Like you might not believe in Nick Richards solely as being a good enough backup center, maybe wanting some more competition. But Mark Williams, he's going to be your guy for the future. And I'm ready to rock with that 100%. So Doug, is there a glaring need as obvious as center has been coming into this offseason? Or is there one that's maybe in tier 2 if center has been in tier 1 the past 5 years? Anything that you can think of that comes close to that? Oh my God, please address this type of need that the Hornets have this offseason?
I think they still need to add defensive presences. I mean, because we don't know the status of Dennis Smith Jr. We don't know if they're going to retain his services. He obviously provided that for the team last season. But that would be, I think to me, there are 2 glaring needs. There's but it's 1 and 1A. It's what I just said, but then it's also primary scorer. Now, maybe they add that with Miles Bridges. He was their leading scorer 2 seasons ago. So maybe that's their answer. Maybe they already know the answer to that question, and that's why they're not really planning to go after anyone else in free agency. But those to me would be the 2 primary things that they have to go after. Obviously, just star talent too. I mean, players that can really lift this team single-handedly. I mean, that's, you know, they just don't have a ton of those options. So,
well, and look, there are tons of things to talk about and things that we've already discussed with Miles Bridges. When it comes to the on-the-floor product from Miles, you talk about a go-to scorer, and he was that for the Hornets, absolutely being the leading scorer here. 20.2 points per game, though. He wasn't an amazing scorer, right? Like 20 is very good, but he wasn't one of these 23-point per game guys, 24, 25.
No, and you know why? And you know why? Because in that 2 seasons ago, we were talking about his 3-point shot taking a step back, and we were wondering why. Yeah. I mean, why that was happening, and it was a very similar story to what happened to PJ Washington this season, which was PJ Washington got an expanded role, not really by the Hornets' choice, but because of all of the circumstances around the injuries and different things. And you saw his efficiency dip down because his offensive game completely changed. Where he shot on the floor completely changed. And, you saw him at times struggle with his three-point shot, where he was pretty efficient three-point shooter the previous season. And the same thing happened with Miles Bridges. And so, yeah, even when they bring, if they bring him back, I mean, that basketball question will still be there.
The only difference there, and you're right, certainly the role changed it. The only difference is that PJ Washington was a good three-point shooter the first 3 seasons, and then he took a dip to 34.8. 34.8 would be the second best three-point shooting season Miles has ever had, right?
Yeah.
Like Miles Bridges only has a 40% three-point percentage one season. There's an outlier year, and that's the good one. The first 2 years he shot under 33, and then the past season, or the last season that he played, it was 33.1. Everything very consistent except for the 1 year that he shot 40% from three. And so you're right. You hope on the court for Miles Bridges, at least what he can do to help the team. Miles Bridges is certainly hoping he can tap back into what he was able to shoot from the perimeter 2 years ago. Nick, obviously a lot to get to with Miles Bridges. You have not shared your thoughts on the news that came out, 30-game suspension total, 20 having already been served in the NBA's eyes. He'll also miss the next 10 games of next season. What would you say about what happened with Miles Bridges and the suspension? Any thoughts that you have about him coming back to the NBA? And we all kind of guessed that he's coming back to the Hornets, but that is not a foregone conclusion as of yet.
Yeah, I mean, given how things played out legally for Miles Bridges and the time between the things playing out legally in October and the NBA actually coming out with a decision on this, I was not surprised that it was 30 games. When it first happened over the summer, I mean, I thought it was going to be an unprecedented, 50-plus game suspension, season-long suspension. I was also not surprised at all, and I think I actually said this on one of the episodes, that they gave him credit for time that he's already missed. He missed the whole season. You could say that's because of his own doing, but he missed missed an entire NBA season, and an important one for him on the floor. I just think the Hornets they're just in this position where they probably have to bring him back from a basketball sense. But I think if they were in another situation, another circumstance, talent-wise, structurally, they might let Miles Bridges go have his second chance somewhere else, because how much is the basketball player on the court worth what you're bringing in, what you're going to deal with, what you're contending with, like morally. I know he pleaded no contest, but it does seem though like they consider his absence last year such a big part of what happened, and they consider him such a big part of what they had been doing from a basketball standpoint. And then you factor in what else you don't have. It feels like they feel like, yeah, we have to bring Miles Bridges back.
Yeah, it's clear they do, with Mitch Kupchak hinting at it, outright saying it, Miles Bridges not being on the team. He said, I'll let you guys think about how much that affected the roster. It's going to be interesting to see how much he gets paid, how much another team might offer him, and then if the Hornets match it, because, you would think the Hornets do. And so you wonder if another franchise still tries to do the whole thing where you up the price knowing they're not going to get him, and then the Hornets just go ahead and say, well, we're going to bring him back because he was such an important part. The money's going to be very interesting. Doug, you had one more thought on that?
That's part of the problem of this whole situation, is it 100%. Feels like the Hornets have telegraphed this to the point where it puts them in a bad bargaining position. And so if there is a team that tries to come in and poison pill this thing, are the Hornets going to feel so backed up against the wall that they end up committing more than they wanted to commit to this situation? And do they feel forced into this, and then something happens down the line, and then this gets even more embarrassing for a franchise that that oscillates between embarrassing and irrelevant? Does it then go back into that same direction? Because there's a lot of emotion when it comes to a franchise that did invest a draft pick and a trade that involved Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who is on his way to becoming, a perennial all-star, maybe perennial all-NBA player, possible MVP someday. You trade that, and then for a player that, you don't want this to be the ending of the story. That's a bad place to be in terms of just decision making, clear-headed decision making, and the team that this regime might not even be around. And to me, that's like the apocalyptic scenario, is that they make this decision and then the team sale happens and the new regime would have to deal with any repercussions of that. But yeah, I mean, tough situation all around.
All right. Well, with that, we'll go to a fun segment, final segment of Locked On Hornets. Yeah, team leaving, Miles Bridges is back. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
Doug brought the mock drafts. It's been a while, and it's especially been a while since you're talking about the offseason having already begun. And so it's been a long time. We've got the mock drafts for you on the other side of the break coming up next on Locked On Hornets. All right, Doug, the floor is yours. Which one did you bring for us? Did you bring multiple or you just brought one?
I don't ever bring one mock draft. What are you talking about?
I know. That was a stupid question. I apologize.
Yeah,
all right, what's the first one you want to show to us?
Well, we'll go to ESPN first. This is Gavoni and Jeremy Woo, who's doing a little work for ESPN. So good for our guy Woo. They've got, I want to start with one that's kind of like, yeah, we sort of know this. Amen Thompson with the 4th pick, and G.G. Jackson out of South Carolina with that 2nd pick that looks to be hovering around 27. Anyone got anything on G.G. Jackson? Didn't get a chance to play in the tournament, so we didn't get any of that. Oh, maybe good thing.
Yeah, he had an interesting year at South Carolina, which included that, I think it was like an Instagram live video of, playing time or, opportunities at the end of the game. But it's kind of the thing that you're not surprised about when a guy has got to go to college for 1 year and he goes to a program that, isn't doing that well and has a new coach, and maybe he's more talented than fits where he went. So he's definitely kind of an intriguing player. I mean, he's got size, he's got athleticism, he's got offensive skill. He can do a lot of things. So that would definitely be an intriguing 2nd pick for sure.
Yeah, he's a great prototype. He's 6'9". Yep. He's the archetype wing that is big and then could develop into being a score first, monster at that position, but very inefficient last season. Mm-hmm. Whether you want to put a ton of stock into that, playing for South Carolina, playing, as a guy, as a freshman that has all this responsibility where you're not shooting well at all from the floor, did not finish the season well, just looking at his game log. A lot of poor nights shooting. The only time that he shot over 42% was in that last game they lost in the conference tournament to Ole Miss. I know Rafael Barlow, I think, of the Locked On Podcast Network is high on him. So, if you wanted somebody backing G.G. Jackson, there would be one. Of course, the thing I know most about him is that he was supposed to go to North Carolina and then dropped out, and then or not dropped out, but just decided to go to South Carolina instead after decommitting to the Tar Heel program. So that's what I know most about Gigi.
From a college basketball standpoint, I think a lot of people in the Carolinas wonder what it would have been like. Would it have changed anything if G.G. Jackson went to North Carolina and his role was different? Would he have been better? Would the Tar Heels have been better? But instead, either party just has a messy year.
100%. Yeah, there you go. All right, so Amen and Gigi being a different name there that we haven't heard in some of the other mock drafts. What's the next one you got for us, Doug?
Okay, so I've got a double shot of CBS mock drafts, one from Gary Parrish, one from Kyle. What's that?
I'm saying straight to the face, double shot, baby. Hit me, CBS shot.
Yeah, I got Gary Parrish, got Kyle Boone, and neither have Amen Thompson slotted at 4 for the Charlotte Hornets. Kyle going with Cam Whitmore in the 4 spot. Amen going 5 to Portland. And Gary going Jarris Walker from Houston to the Hornets at 4. And then Amen Thompson at 5. And this is interesting to me because I do wonder, so many people have Amen at 4. Brandon Miller at 3, Scoot at 2, or Scoot at 3 and Brandon Miller at 2. But Amen has just been real sticky right there at 4. But I do wonder, once the microscope really gets put down on these guys, during the combine and during individual workouts, and they start to dig into the Overtime Elite program a little bit closer, will these guys start to slip and open up opportunities for Cam Whitmore or Jarris Walker? Who would be, I guess the question here is, who would be more interesting to you guys if that did happen? If I'm in Fell, would a Cam Whitmore be more interesting to you or a Jarris Walker?
Well, it'd be Cam Whitmore, and I like Jarris Walker a lot, to be honest, but it'd be Cam Whitmore just because I think he fits more of a position and could be defensively, Jarris Walker defensively enticing too, just at a different position for Whitmore. And you've been a Cam pick 4 guy, right? Like over Amen, you've been with Cam this whole time, Doug? Or you moved
I really like Cam Whitmore a lot, especially on the defensive end of the floor. I mean, he's just a crazy wingspan, a menace there. I love Cam Whitmore. I want to see if the pick is 4 or below, I want to see them put an onus on the defensive end. So that's going to be guys like Cam Whitmore, could be a guy like maybe Keontae George, Kason Wallace out of Kentucky, if they're in that kind of 6, 7, 8.
Is Brandon Miller out for you, or is he still 3 for you?
I don't think he would make it to 4, is what I'm saying. I'm saying if they hit it 4 or below, I want them to put the onus on the defensive end of the floor.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is like the missed out on Brandon Miller sweepstakes for kind of that size, that forward position. And, also could picking one of these guys affect some of their other decisions that they have to make of, PJ Washington and Miles Bridges.
Nick, we have not talked to you, I believe, since UConn won the championship. Maybe we have, and we just didn't talk about it enough.
No,
I think we have.
Nope.
Yeah. So Jordan Hawkins, who was awesome in the championship game, congratulations. And then also Adama Sanogo, who ended up winning MOP. He declared for the NBA draft, which if you're a UConn fan, you might want to see him come back, but at least you got a championship from him. What would your scouting report be on some of the UConn prospects?
Man, I think I told you guys, and this was before the Sweet 16, like, oh, look out for Jordan Hawkins. He could be like a Bryce McGowan's type player. Well, I think he's outpaced that a little bit in terms of his draft stock.
Yeah.
He just has a beautiful shot, man, and he's got some size. He's still young. I don't even think he is 20. He's not 21. I think he's probably kind of like a mid-first round pick. Sanogo, the guy has amazing footwork. He's really, really good defensively. We'll see how the offensive game translates. I mean, he has the ability to be dominant in college. There was some talk that he might stay another year, but good for him. He's got to get out there and do what he needs to do. But Hawkins for sure, I think is first round pick.
Man,
Interestingly, Kyle Boone has Jordan Hawkins going 13th to the Raptors, and Gary Parrish doesn't have Jordan Hawkins drafted at all in the first round.
He's kind of one of those players. I mean, I don't think if it was for this tournament that he would be considered by a lot of people except Gary Parrish a for sure first round pick. So he had a great tournament, as did the whole team, and that's going to help.
There is a huge gap for him. It'll be interesting to see where he's selected. All right, that's Nick Carboni of WCNC. Not going to be with us next week because he's going to be in Kansas City living it up at the NFL draft. You can follow him on Twitter at Nick Carboni, WCNC. Nick, we appreciate the time as always, man. Have fun.
Thanks, guys.
That's Doug Branson. Catch his Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com, and listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. Thanks for making us your first listen. Make your second listen. Game to Game NBA. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the league with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Catch it wherever you get your podcast. Have a great rest of your day. We'll be back with you tomorrow.